So Laurence Bennett, the new film with The Wizard of Lies, gives us an inside look into the life of Bernie Madoff. You, as the production designer, helped create the world of Bernie Madoff, or I should say recreate the world of Bernie Madoff.
Yeah.
Where did you start from?
As always with the script, discussions with Barry Levinson, it was apparent that we needed to approach it as a mystery, because while we know the overall scope of what Madoff did and some things about how he did it, so much remains enigmatic that it seemed good to approach it as little fragments of clues that build up as time goes on. So I got stuck straight away into a lot of visual research about the Madoffs and about their time in New York.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask, what kind of access did you have to the actual Madoff home? Did you have any at all?
None. The property's been sold, and there's so much ill will surrounding the whole affair that we knew that we'd never be able to get anywhere near the building where the penthouse was, nor near the Lipstick building where Madoff offices were. So that meant needing to find good analogs for those spaces. And there's a bit of documentation about both the penthouse and his other properties and the offices online. So fortunately, the FBI did a good job of documenting with evidentiary photographs aspects of the office and the penthouse.
And how much of this came from your own imagination, or just your interpretations of who Bernie Madoff was in regards to this film?
Well, I read Diana Enriquez's book, which is wonderful, and some other bits and pieces, tons of articles online, looked at everything I could find by way of visual research about them. And at the end of the day, you need to blur some edges. One thing in particular, for a supposed billionaire, Bernie's lifestyle was not that grand. So I was afraid there was going to be a bit of a gap between audience expectations and what their actual penthouse was like. So we styled them up a little bit, just freshened up the decor. But otherwise, we tried to stick to the kinds of furniture and the kind of layout and the way they lived.
One of the things that struck me about the designs of this film is that there's sort of a coldness to it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that?
I think that because detachment is a really strong word I would associate with Bernie. There's I think needs to be a detachment about the design to an extent. I mean, certainly it never wanted to pop to foreground. It always wanted to background all the characters and aspects of the story. There is, I think, a sort of gradual arc in the design, and certainly in the photography, that begins objective and goes toward the subjective as we get a little closer to a psychological look at Bernie rather than objective one.
Explain that a little bit, because it's really fascinating. How were some of the ways that you helped make it throughout the course of the film? How did you create that arc visually?
I think it was setting up environments like their penthouse, which could be transformed with very little effort, with dressing, aspects of dressing and photography, certainly lighting and composition, and the spaces where they had their social events, where we could make it just a little edgier as we went along. I think if you look at the two social events that they staged, that we portrayed in the piece, the first being the beach party at their property in Montauk, where it's exterior, it's daylit into beautiful evening, and it's a lovely glowing white marquee, the big white tent and the glowing balls in the sand. There's an approachability about that, but still this little bit of social glitz, this little veneer of prettiness about it. And then compare that with the environment of the Palm Beach environment. They had an event about that time at some club down in Palm Beach. And by making that, again, theming that largely with light, but making it point sources, and using the windows of the place to mirror the whole background. And the fact that it was a fan-shaped sort of terrace, the geography of the place becomes inscrutable. So you can never get a fix on where you are. And combining that with Barry's approach to shooting the scene in short jump cuts and the dizzying sort of nature of some of the whip pans in there, and the way that Bernie's hustle is sort of driven and underscored by the jazz combo. I think that all adds to a bit of dizziness that helps disorient. I think that's a great example of it.
Okay, gotcha. Talk a little bit about Bernie's office. Talk about creating that, and what were your thoughts, not just in terms of recreating it factually, but also, I guess, symbolically or thematically, or
right. Because we couldn't get into the actual building, we looked at some spaces in Manhattan for that. And it just seemed insane to try to do the amount of work we need to do with the attention that the project might get as well in the city. So Andy Cook, my location manager friend, found an empty office building in an executive park up in Westchester. And that afforded us the opportunity to be out in the suburbs, to sort of camp out there for the weeks that we needed to transform the space. We gutted a floor of the building, retaining just little bits and pieces of the build out there, and then built out the trading floor and Bernie's office, and tried to bring some of the keynote elements of the way that his office had been decorated. And it's very gray and metal and black, very business-like and straightforward. But the glass box that contains Bernie's private office, that's based as closely on as I could figure out what his office had been like, and particularly down to the decor, the artwork specifically. On the wall, it's only really featured in one shot, but he had a suite of Roy Lichtenstein prints in which Lichtenstein did a deconstruction of a Picasso bull. So I think Bernie had this fascination with bulls. There was certainly a stuffed bull footstool in his home office in his den. But I think his identification may have been some sort of short, powerful man sort of image. So to me, getting that right was really important. And the Liechtenstein Foundation allowed us permission they gave us high-res files of each of those images and let us reproduce them really accurately. And then we destroyed them after the shoot. That was really nice of them, because I thought that the veracity of those went really close to this character thing about Bernie.
Right.
And display of himself.
Right. You describe all these sets, and I mean, it just highlights how much ground is covered in this film. If you could talk a bit about the practicality of doing all of these sets on a TV schedule.
Yeah.
What is that like for you?
I'm glad you went to the issue of schedule rather than budget, because no film or budget ever has the money they would like to have. But in television, certainly, schedule is a real driving thing. So it goes to issues of cast availability. You've got to work really smart and crazy to piece together some of the combinations to get through the schedule. It's a driving factor, and particularly time of year we were shooting was coming into autumn, and how can you know when to schedule a sequence on the beach when storms could hit the south shore of Long Island at any time? So we had to juggle and sometimes make a few swaps. Also, we had to portray bits and pieces of Florida, including exterior. So, there's a trick in New York in autumn. It's a constant sort of weight on the whole process.
Well, you've done a lot of different kinds of films and television shows, a lot of independent films as well, like Crash. Does that help prepare you for something like this?
It does, and also I think just episodic television. People look down on it for years. only now I think is television sort of really coming into its own. But if you can knock out 20 odd hours of television in the space of 8 or 9 months, an hour of film every 8 or 9, 10 days, you really, I think, get your chops down in terms of trusting your instincts, become very instinctive in knowing how to approach problems like scheduling and budget. You have to go with your first choice and sort of work it through. I think filmmaking is an art in which, I've seen a lot of damage done by people being indecisive. Indecision does not create for great morale or great decisions, below you. And you can always change your mind, but just making a decision and moving forward, and then adapting it if you have to, I think is really important. And in any kind of filmmaking, television, the biggest budget film, the smallest one, nobody ever has the time or money they'd like to. And no good work gets done without working beyond those limitations.
To that end, working with somebody like Barry Levinson, what was that collaboration like between the two of you?
It was delightful. Barry is a great writer and director, and his energy is incredible. Through prep, through the writing of the piece, and through photography until the last day, Barry was constantly looking for ways to tell the story more pointedly, more accurately, more economically. The whole bit of the fragment of Bernie in the BLMIS offices with the office on fire metaphorically is a great example. One day we were approaching the end of the block of shooting in the location, and Barry said to Eigel, the DP, and I have this image of, like to have a fragment in the hallucination sequence with Bernie in the office on fire. We all sort of looked at one another and talked for literally only 5 or 6 minutes about the practicality, the efficacy of a practical burn. And being in a real building, just decided to approach it much more abstractly and hit on the idea of using all of these monitors as an ocean of fire. I think that was a great example of how, his constant drive to find ways to portray Bernie's psychological state just made us work that little bit harder to, are we making the right images? How can we make it better? Everything about that sequence, the hallucination sequence, I think really, really sharpened our skills.
Right. For your work on The Artist, you received an Academy Award nomination for Best Production Design. I wonder what that recognition meant for you.
Well, that's obviously huge, being recognized by your peers and also by my French and British colleagues as well. Was a tremendous honor. I've been very fortunate to have been involved with a couple of very small indies that went all the way to Best Picture. So that's pretty exciting. And having been on both on The Crash and The Artist, I think all of us collectively in the crew and cast felt at the time that we were involved in making something very special. But the odds of it ever getting recognized, when you work on a piece that doesn't have distribution, mm-hmm. in some cases doesn't have complete financing when you're in the middle of it, it's an act of faith and love.
Well, you've got another great one with this one. Laurence, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work.
It's my pleasure, Zach. Thanks so much. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, the same here. Thank you so much.
Take care.